Let's open up the Vintage Collection 3.75-inch figure of K-2SO from Andor Season 2. Varykino. If it's Star Wars, we collect it. Hello there, thanks for visiting Varykino. As a big fan and collector of Hasbro's The Vintage Collection range of Star Wars 3.75-inch figures, I'm always kind of surprised when I'm able to find them locally here in New Zealand around the same time as they are appearing on store shelves in other countries like the United States. So you can imagine my surprise when a local retailer put up on their website a partial wave from the most recent wave of figures. Not quite sure why, but they had 3 from the new wave in stock. They had Bo-Katan Kryze, Play 015, K-2SO from Andor, and Jod Narnarwood from Skeleton Crew. So of course I had to pick up all 3, and I was so excited to have new figures in hand that I sat down and did a video checking them out as carded figures. But now of course I'm going through and opening them up one by one. I've already opened up Jod from Skeleton Crew. That was a really cool figure, a really fun opening. And next up we have K-2SO on an Andor Season 2 card. This is really exciting. I don't own the original Vintage Collection version of K-2SO on the Rogue One card. Very hard to find here in New Zealand if it actually ever came here. So I'm super excited. This is my first time opening up a Vintage Collection version of K-2SO. It's going to be fun. Thank you so much for hanging out with me today. Coming up really soon, I'll open up the figure, check out all of the details and the articulation, but first let's take a quick look at the backing card. The Vintage Collection backing cards take heavy inspiration from the original Kenner backing cards of the Star Wars figures of the 1970s and 80s, and I just love the nostalgic feel. It's nice and clean. I think it works really nicely, and I especially love the Andor series logo on this particular backing card style. The hard red sort of stencil style font with the rebellion symbol for the O fits really nicely into that sort of nameplate there. It looks really cool. Of course, we've got the Star Wars logo circling that and the single chrome racetrack extending around the character art here on the side. Now I know that K-2SO has already been issued in the Vintage Collection line, but that one was on a Rogue One card. Now personally, I never found that one here in New Zealand, so I'm very excited to find him finally. I don't even mind what backing card it is. I'm not even sure if I'm going to add this one into my Rogue One collection or into starting in a little bit of a tiny Andor Season 2 section. I don't know. I'm hoping to pick up 2 if I can find 2. Now, of course, because this is technically an Andor card, we don't really have stills yet for the series. We have got that one shot from the recently released sort of teaser trailer showing him in the series, but I really like the art we have here on the side. I am assuming that this is a bit of a promotional composite shot because we don't really have screen grabs, so I'm not sure if this background is of anything in particular. It looks sort of generated, a little bit like a CGI shot here of sort of K-2SO. But sometimes these sort of generated, sort of mocked up pictures can give us a better, clearer picture of the character, because sometimes screenshots are a little bit dark, shadowed, grainy, in motion. Sometimes the generated shots just look nice and clear. I will have to say it's kind of an interesting angle being at the side. We can see that Imperial symbol on his shoulder nicely, but he's a little bit cut off by the bubble here, and we do have a little bit of empty space here to the side. But I know that they're sort of trying to mix it up and make it look different to the earlier backing card. For K-2SO, we have a green accent color here for both the nameplate with white font. Interestingly, they have also put in the very old school style the phonetic spelling there, the sort of pronunciation of K-2SO underneath there as well. And of course, we have the green in behind the character. He's very tall. The bubble is taller than a standard human figure bubble, so it kind of extends up there and pushes the nameplate up a little bit higher. He doesn't come with much, just one single blaster accessory, but then pretty imposing figures. They don't really have too much else. So I think that's really all he needs. He's pretty tall there. Moving on to the back, we have that same green accent color composing most of the top of the card here. This one is VC340. We've got a picture of the front of the backing card, and we have the figure posed there. Interestingly, he he doesn't seem to be posed holding the blaster pistol accessory. A lot of the times the picture on the back shows them posed with their accessories, so you get a sense of what they will look like when you take them out of their packaging, but he doesn't appear to be holding it there. I just thought that was interesting. We also have a blurb about K-2SO. Oftentimes the blurbs are very high level, largely about the series or movie to avoid spoilers, but we are very familiar with who K-2SO is. Of course, he was introduced in Rogue One. A reprogrammed Imperial security droid, K-2SO is an effective insertion agent, as he can blend in perfectly at Imperial installations and outposts. So perhaps that's a little bit more of an introduction to him in Rogue One. Of course, we see him sort of helping them infiltrate the base, but perhaps we will see him doing that in Andor as well. I really can't wait for Andor coming out in April next year, of course. We have the Vintage Collection logo here, and the rest of the packaging is a little bit dull. A light grey section here with the barcode, copyright text, all of that kind of stuff. I really wasn't expecting to see K-2SO coming out on an Andor card so early. Everyone kind of knows he's coming out. It's no big secret, but I wasn't expecting it this early. I thought perhaps they would leave it further down at the release schedule, a little bit closer in the lead up to the series. But I'm super excited. I can't wait to get stuck in and open it up, so let's get going. So now I have K-2SO and his one blaster pistol accessory out of the plastic bubble, so we can go over all of the details. And as you can see, he stands up really well out of the packaging. Just a tiny tweak to his left leg there, and he stood up perfectly. I was a little bit worried. He is very sort of top heavy, but he's got a good center of gravity, nice sturdy ankles, and a good level feet. So I was very excited about that. So let's get stuck in and check out the details. I'll go through the paint work and the details, and then we'll test out the articulation. So he's really cool. I like this dark Imperial color scheme, of course. He looks mostly black, but there is a really cool amount of surface detail. So on the head, we've got silver painting for the eyes. It's kind of funny. On certain angles, you can't see it at all, and then you catch the light, and it almost looks like they glow. That silver paint really catching the light well there. A lot of silver details around the sort of his mouth area there as well. We have a small red dot there on the side, and pretty plain there on the back, just sort of sculpting details in the back there, but really menacing sort of skull-like face. But at the same time, it's interesting knowing this sort of with the voice work by the fabulous Alan Tudyk. Of course, there's some very sort of humorous components to K-2SO, that even though the design of the droid is very ominous, very sort of imperial, I love the characterization of K-2SO. Just, I can't wait to see him again. So we've got some fantastic weathering to really accent up this figure. Some really nice silver sort of weathering marks here on the chest. Really nice fine paint lines there. There's a tiny little paint mark here, which I'm not sure is supposed to be there. It's a little bit of sort of a little yellow. Could be a scratch, could be actual paint. I'm not sure, but because of the weathered appearance here on the chest, I don't mind, and that's kind of rare. We've got some fantastic digital printing that kind of gives a bit of a rust appearance in the sort of dark brown sections. We've got a bit here on the chest, some off to the side. I really like the sort of the rust painting on the elbow here. It's kind of over the silver, just kind of makes it look like it's sort of worn away a little bit, gotten a little bit rusty. And we also have more, if I can move that out of the way, here on the top of the left leg here. Really cool, but I especially love the silver. Just the fine paint application that we get on modern figures, just really sort of hitting on those edges. This one's really nicely sort of lined up with the edge there, the sort of shoulder piece. Really cool. And of course, we have to point out the Imperial symbol printing on here on both shoulders. So I've seen slightly tidier painting for the Imperial symbol on action figures, but of course he is weathered, so it doesn't have to be absolutely pristine. And it's certainly better than what we used to get on a lot of other figures there. It looks really nice. Nice and silver, catching the light well. Looks very cool there. So of course we've got yellow and grey around at the shoulder joint. The yellow line, it looks quite well painted. Just a little bit of sort of a haze where it goes over the edge on this side here in the back. Looks pretty nice and tidy here from the front. This side in particular, Very nice and tidy in terms of the paint application around the front, and pretty tidy around the back as well. Same goes for that grey. We've got a two-tone grain here, light with those sort of darker grey sections there. Very nice, particularly when you're dealing with such contrasting colors where you've got a light color and a dark color. You really don't want that to match up. And look at that silver line around that neck section. Very, very nice. Oh, I love the era of digital printing. The application, you'd never get a line like this, even just, you know, a few years ago. Everything is just so much more precise and finer detail. I just can't get over those really cool silver eyes catching the light. Okay, going down the body. Look at the silver lines here on the chest. Again, matching up really nicely to the sculpted detail underneath. That is very, very nice in terms of the alignment on that. A nice fine line, again, catching the light there. Some really nice, very sharp details here. Just, fantastic. Really nice. Sometimes I feel like I'm looking at a larger scale figure just because of the fine detail. I keep having to remind myself that because he's taller, I feel like I'm holding a 6-inch Black Series figure. But of course, he's a 3.75-inch scale figure, and just the fine detail is really nice. So I'm just going to quickly move his arms up out of the way, doing a bit of a test of his articulation there, just so we can see some of the abdomen details here. So moving down, we can see that sculpting there on the abdomen as well. Very angular, and we've got these really nice silver lines kind of highlighting the sort of metal rod components in the abdomen here of the droid figure. We've got a little bit of silver paint here on the back section as well. Look at those 3 little lines. We've got the dots. It's so small. I have to keep trying to get the camera to focus on it because it matches up with the sculpting detail there really nicely. Those dots are recessed in the sculpting there, and those dots of paint line up really nicely. Oh, that's really nice to see. And again, you can see just all the painted details on the back of the arms. I love the way that it's really sitting there very close to the edge of the sculpting. More silver trim here around the legs, but this time a little less tidy compared to the one around at the neckline there. A little sort of hazy in patches, particularly on this one, but still a lot better than we've seen in the past. It looks tidier from the front, which is always useful when it comes to Star Wars figures. Looks very nice, following along with the sculpting lines there. Some really nice little details there, like on the hips there. And we've got more weathering coming down. Sometimes when we have Star Wars figures, there's a lot of weathering on the top of the body, like on, say, Clone Trooper armor, and then it's almost like Hasbro forgot on some of the lower sections where we can sort of have whole parts of the leg where it feels like there's no weathering at all. And I think it kind of, when you notice it, it catches your eye. We've got some really nice silver weathering and rust coming down all the way down here to the legs. So it really does feel like it's all sort of, you know, cohesive in terms of its design. We've got the silver knees, again accented with that brown that gives it a bit of a rust appearance, which is really nice, and more silver weathering. Of course, we've got that big patch of brown here on that left leg. I just keep looking at this and it's giving me such a feeling of metal. I know it's plastic, but your brain is just so used to sort of seeing that dark rust color on silver metal. It just gives it a really realistic sort of surface detail there. Now, you might be able to see that there are sculpted sort of little recessed circles because it's supposed to kind of look like a gap through, like you'd be able to see all the way through in terms of the actual droid design on screen, but we need plastic to be articulated, so the real world execution of that means that we kind of have this illusion of being able to see through. So it's a painted black circle on the articulation points, and you can see some of them are a little bit better than others. This one is pretty well aligned, though we've got a tiny little section there which isn't quite fully completely sort of circled in like a multi-choice question, not quite all the way through there. The one on this side is just a tiny bit misaligned. It's a little bit high in terms of that sculpted, slightly recessed circle there. Looking in across at the inner leg, this one here is a little bit misaligned to the right. We can just see that sort of sculpted circle there. And looking at the other side, this one looks very nicely aligned there, all the way filled in, but I still really like that sort of rust paint there. Again, same sort of thing here on the ankles, except this time the circle is smaller than the sort of inner section. So we're looking more at sort of how centered it is. This one looks pretty good, but this ankle, it's giving me sort of like a Coke can vibes, because we've sort of got this sculpted circle at the top, and then that black circle is down the bottom. Unfortunately, it's making me think of the top of a soda can. And again, here on the other side, you can see on here, it's a little bit down at the bottom. This one, a little bit more centered, but again, it's kind of overlapping with a sculpted detail there. So a little less convincing on the ankles. But I'm generally not paying too close of attention to the ankle paint. And, you know, when it's on the shelf, it kind of gives the illusion, you know, of course, you know, it should be sort of hollow with that sort of illusion there. I know on some figures, it's kind of like a clear peg that you can do in sort of the larger Black Series scale. But for the scale, you need the stability, you need the plastic there. Otherwise, it gets way too flimsy and too easy to break. So I think that's a good sort of compromise. We kind of get the illusion of sort of a hollow circle cutting through the joins there. And we've also got it, if I can pop his arms down, on the elbows there, not so much on the wrists. And I'm going to have to, you know, dig up some of my other figures very shortly to see if that is, I feel like perhaps that's missing there. I don't know. The sculpting on the wrists, I feel, is a little bit oversized just by going off the backing card detail, just as my most immediate reference point. But of course, the earlier versions of K-2SO that came out around the time of Rogue One were not articulated to the point of this one. They were that 5-point of articulation. So no movement at these sort of slender joins. So you could sculpt it all as one solid part. So the articulation for the wrist could be more accurate in scale, but because we've actually got to have moving parts here for the wrist, which I can just that's a bit stiff, but yes, this is articulated, but it's full silver. And I feel like perhaps there was maybe supposed to be paint, or perhaps there should be paint there just to kind of give that illusion of hollowness. I'm going to have to look up some screenshots, because I can see that they have done that on the elbows there. We can see that black line up there. Quite a nice lining up of the black dot there for the sculpting. And again here, and we'll just rotate that one a little bit to the outer side. Yeah, the elbows do look a lot better lined up, which is nice. I tend to sort of focus my eyes towards the face and sort of upper body on action figures. So if details are sort of correct in the upper section, I tend to be a little bit more forgiving about the legs. I know I mentioned that if the weathering is missing, it throws me off, because I generally think of, you know, if you're going to get weathering up here, certainly if I'm out and about, I tend to get more mud and dirt on my jeans and lower parts of the body. So I can imagine if you're in battle, you would get battle damage on your lower half as well, not just around your chest. So a little bit plain on the back, I have to say. We've got some fantastic rust and silver weathering down at the front. You can really see on the back, on the black surface, it just really shows up because black is such a strong color. So when we move to the back, he looks almost like a completely different droid. He is completely clean and tidy. I don't see any sort of rust on the back of the joins and no silver weathering, which is a little bit of a shame. I guess for the most part, if a droid is coming towards you, it's going to be battle damaged from the front, but it does seem just a little bit different. But then again, I don't know that I've really studied the back of K-2SO on screen to see if he has any battle damage to his back. But it's just, in terms of a figure, it just feels a little bit more obvious when I'm looking at it in a 3D space. There's just straight black, a lot of silver details, which are really tidily applied, but no weathering, no rust or anything like that here on the back as well. So other than that, looks pretty cool. We've got this tiny little sort of antenna piece, which is inserted there as a separate sculpted piece that's been attached and put in there. That's kind of nice. Got a little bit of wiggle to it, so just probably a bit more of that little flexible rubber so it doesn't get broken off, because those are very fine antenna points. Kind of reminds me of a BB-8's antennas, you know, because they sort of stuck up. They were better to be done in something that had a little bit more flex, so you didn't just break them off accidentally, which is nice there. Okay. So I like the paintwork, you know. I think that especially the weathering. This digital printing on the chest looks really nice, and I think the fine details like those sort of rods around the waist and that printing there on the back, really, really nice. Like I said, I don't have the original vintage collection version of K-2SO from Rogue One, so this is my first time checking him out, and he just looks really cool. Very fine neck detail there. So cool. And it looks like he might have two parts of articulation there in the neck. Yeah, okay. I'm intrigued. Let's get stuck into the articulation. So, of course, we can move that neck piece down because that kind of looks like a ball joint there with the way that that is attached. I can sort of rock it to the sides. That's really nice. A little bit, you know, a little bit stiff to kind of get going, and I really don't want to snap his neck, but once I can get that moving, that goes. And of course, he's also attached at the base of his sort of skull droid part there as well. Very cool. He's got a lot of personality, so I feel like I really want to convey that with sort of head movements and sort of, because, you know, we can't fix their expressions. It's sort of like C-3PO. They use body language to sort of help convey, and I think that that's really cool. Give him a little bit more personality. If he was like an off the conveyor belt line KX-Droid, then I think being steady and straight but having some sort of personality, him being a K-2SO figure, is just really fun. That's really nice. I'm having a lot of fun playing with that. Okay, so he's not going to have completely the same sort of articulation as a human, but of course droids do translate well into action figures because they already come with very clear and distinct articulation points. So let's check out his torso there, because we can see that so clearly where that is going to move, and that is really nice and fluid. I can move him to the side and he is staying there. He doesn't snap back. Slightly less on the tipping back, but a reasonable amount of forward. He has a little bit springy there. I can move him forward and he kind of wants to stay upright, so a little bit, he stays to the back and I can kind of move him to center, but he's not going to bend forward too much, which is perhaps useful. I think he would be almost impossible to balance without a stand if I was sort of tipping him forward, but a good amount of movement there to the back, and of course very nice to the side. He is a droid, so I guess it doesn't really matter that I can turn him almost the way round. I don't really want to turn him all the way around, but there we go. I'm not going to do that for display, of course, but very smooth, very easy to articulate there from side to side. Okay, so let's just have a quick look at the arms. Okay, can spin them all the way around. Of course, we don't have clothing or sort of, you know, shoulder human anatomy to have to worry about. That's nice and easy. Just moving him around. Before, I was finding these sort of droid articulation points to be very stiff. You kind of have to get in there. That's really fighting me, and I don't want to break a toy, you know? It's very stiff. It's fighting me. I feel like I'm flexing the plastic. I'm going to have to play with that a bit because that's really, really fighting me. And I want to pose him with his blaster pistol, but I don't want to break. I feel like I'm flexing the peg that's attaching into the upper arm. Let's just test out. Okay, so the wrists, I can spin those around. Those are always a little bit easier to articulate. I want to pose him. Okay, got the wrist there. He can finally, I know I've just got to like loosen up the joints, especially with this metallic paint. Sometimes I feel like metallic paint goes on a bit thicker, just makes the joints a little bit, because now I've got him moving there. He can move his wrists like that, and of course we can spin them around. And I'm sure the other hand is just going to work the same way. Okay, there. So he's got slightly different grips. You can kind of see this hand's a little bit more like this. The other one's got a little bit more of a curl to the fingers there. And this one has a separate trigger finger. We can see that it's separate there. This one also has a separate trigger finger. You can see that it's extended there. So it's going to be interesting to see which one's going to hold the blaster pistol a little bit better. Don't know why I can't get this one to bend at the elbow. That's a little bit annoying, because I'll try bending it the other way. There we go. Of course, humans wouldn't bend that way, but he's a droid, so it doesn't really matter. Okay. Let's see. Are you going to bend? Finally. Oh, I don't like it when toys make me anxious about articulating them, but there we go. Okay, so he's not really going to go up high. We get sort of a bit more of a 45-degree angle there in terms of the elbows there. And yes, a little bit clicky on that one. Kind of has a few sort of, it's not stopping points, but I can sort of feel it clicking there. But yes, we can articulate sort of out, but just a little bit stiff there through the arms, because they are narrower than sort of human arms in terms of the articulation points, and I get the feeling the lower legs are going to be the same. So we've got very different hip articulation. It's kind of part of what we see on screen, of course, but let's just, you know, check it out. Of course, we're going to get some really bendy poses, and that spins nicely, not too much on the outer sort of side of things, because that top hip there is going to hit there, but we can sort of rock that around, we can spin that. Now, we don't have any kind of mid-torso articulation. I don't think we really need to on this one. The legs are thin enough as it is. I think that would potentially bring in too much flexibility. We need these legs to be pretty sturdy because we're balancing a pretty heavy torso on them. But let's test out the knees. Oh, thank goodness. That was easier than his elbow. There we go. That's about as high up in the back as we can get. But of course, he can flex a lot there at the hips, so we can get some pretty acrobatic poses there. Can spin that all the way around. Okay, ankles, I'm expecting maybe a little bit of resistance here because they are narrow. Okay, we can go all the way back there. Little bit of and quite tight there in the front. We can go all the way, far more than human anatomy would go. But yeah, so okay, so once I get going with the articulation, he came out of the box kind of stiff, kind of fun that I can actually balance him a lot better than I thought. I was a little bit worried there, but yeah, even with his arms completely up, he's standing there quite well. And I've bent his hips and knees all different directions, and he's still balancing pretty well. He does have peg holes, but I'm pretty sure, like most of my other modern vintage collection figures, they don't fit the classic clearer stands that I have used for most of my modern era 3.75-inch figures. So I'm going to have to source more stands. I don't like the idea of my figures dominoing off my shelf, so going to have to source some stands. But for now, he stands pretty well, even though I've got his arms way up in the air. So he's going to be a lot of fun playing around with all of the articulation. I think just being a little bit careful, moving him slowly, because the attachment points are just so much thinner than they are on other humanoid characters there. But he looks really cool. I'm loving just the sort of the angles I can get with him, and he still stands up. I can sort of tip his torso around. Really cool. Lots of personality in this figure, and I'm just loving the detail. It feels quite sturdy. Some of the other droid figures I've came across, they kind of felt like they had rubbery sections to them, but more flexibility in them. This is completely hard plastic through the torso and his chest as well. This isn't like a rubbery sort of plastic where you can sort of feel it flexing when you press it. That is completely solid, which gives us this really fine detail. And that torso section, that is completely solid, going through to sort of the hip section here as well. Everything feels like it's made out of that proper plastic that gives us the really fine detail, which I like, and just gives him his stability. He stands up a lot better than I found with the Dark Troopers from the Mandalorian series. In both scales, I found them a bit awkward to sort of stand up. They didn't feel sort of sturdy. This guy feels sturdy, even though he's got very slender limbs, a sort of a slender sort of feel to him. He's so sturdy, he stands up. How fantastic. Okay, so to make sure I don't knock him over, he's just going to sit there for a minute. Let's take a look at the small blaster pistol accessory. So just plain black. We've got a little bit of a scope here with a nice cutout. We've got an enclosed trigger guard there, so hopefully his droid finger is going to fit in that nicely. It's pretty flat. There's not a lot of fine detail on it, but what we would expect. It is a little bit flexible. You can see this part I can pull up, so that's not going to snap off too easily, but just want to make sure that I'm not sort of bending that on a permanent basis, because that'll probably get a little bit bent out of shape. But Sometimes when they're a little bit flexible, it's a little bit easier to sort of maneuver it into hands for holding, because it kind of moves with you rather than fighting. So he's got very long arms. Let's see how easy it is to get into his hand. I do apologize. We're working with black hands and a black blaster here, so sometimes the detail can be a little bit hard to see, but I'm expecting this to hopefully go into his hand here. Not too difficult. Little bit there. Okay, that was just a little bit of a nudge, and I can get his finger right into that trigger guard, nice and easy. He holds that very well. It's not going to come out there. Very, very cool. You can see how well he's holding that. Very nice. I don't know that I need a K-2SO or a KX-Droid to hold a blaster pistol, but I very much appreciate that they did include one. Just sometimes you want characters to hold something. Other times, you know, just the droids themselves are cool enough. If I get him to bend at the elbows, this one's still very stiff. There we go. That looks a bit better. Very, very nice. Okay, because he's got a separate trigger finger in the other hand, I want to just test it in the other side as well. Let's see if I can encourage this elbow to just bend a little bit. Come on, the thick metallic paint, I think, is just making that one a little bit stiff. Okay, so we've got the extended trigger finger in this hand here as well. Takes a little bit of just maneuvering just to hook that into the finger. Very nice. Very cool. So we've got the options there, because of course I would imagine droids are programmed to handle weapons in whichever they hand. They don't have sort of like a dominant hand like humans would. So I like the fact that he can hold a weapon in either hand there. Very nice. Looks great. Cool. Okay, so let's just test. Can he still stand up? Yes, he can. Great. Cool. He's so steady. I was really worried with these skinny legs and how tall he is. I was a little bit worried about balancing. So I just want to quickly grab one of my old versions here. So this is the 5-point of articulation one that came out around the time of Rogue One. And you can probably see that he unfortunately suffers from that sort of sticky plastic condition where the surface kind of gets a little bit sticky over time. I have done my best to keep him in good condition, but it's just one of those things. Some figures just go a little bit sticky over time, and it's been quite a few years since Rogue One. So while I was holding this one, I was thinking back to the details on this one, and I'll include some detail shots to show the detail a little bit better between these two, because they are black on black. It is a little bit hard to show, but the detail between these two is absolutely night and day, as I would expect. If I just straighten these arms, as I would expect between a vintage collection with high level of detail and articulation compared to the, say, more younger fan orientated 5-point of articulation one. The paintwork is night and day. We've got some really fine detail, and of course the sculpting here. There are some details that were able to be done in the older figure. You can see that we have light shining through the articulation points. Because there was no articulation, they were able to just make them hollow pieces because they are completely rigid. Not in the ankles, but in the knees, the elbows, and of course we have the much smaller articulation sculpting there for the wrist compared to the modern one, because it doesn't move at the wrist. So they were able to keep that one smaller, perhaps a little bit more accurate. But details like the Imperial symbol here on the shoulder, much nicer on the new one there. A lot of similarities in terms of the scale, but when you look at some of the details, like on the back, you really just see the sharpness in the details, and of course all being accented with the silver. Just, oh, it looks fantastic. This one, you know, I love all my Star Wars toys. I try not to play favorites, but when you really do see such a stark comparison side by side, it just reminds me of just how excited I am to have the vintage collection era as we do, with the level of detail, the articulation, and the fantastic paint apps there. Really cool. So it's a little bit sad to see. The one detail that is just jumping out to me, this one has little blue and white dots there on the front of the chest. This one has a sculpted detail section there. I think, actually, wow, I'd missed that right at the start. It wasn't until I saw the much more sort of, shall we say, clumsier paint application of the dots there that I actually stopped and looked. And yes, there is a very small blue and silver dot here on the chest. That is so fine. My eyes didn't even notice that. Wow. That is so cool. That is so tiny. I only sort of really see it when the light is catching on it. Wow, I was going to say that was one, I thought maybe that was a section where this one actually had a detail that this one didn't, but nope, this one does as well. Wow, okay, so apart from the sort of the, shall we say, inaccuracies of the sort of hollow articulation points like we have here on this figure, this one, absolutely the winner in my book, and I will gladly take the sort of the illusion of a hollow join in order to be able to get more poses, because of course this one just has those straight limbs. He can't move at the elbows or the knees, so absolutely fantastic. So excited to be able to sort of upgrade my figure for display to the new Vintage Collection Era 1. Two figures I am very excited to finally have side by side. I have here Cassian Andor as seen in the Andor series, Series 1. This is VC340. I absolutely love this figure. The detail on it, the digital printing around the face, absolutely fantastic. And I finally have Cassian next to K-2SO. Of course, we haven't seen them together side by side in the Andor series quite yet, but I'm very excited for Series 2 coming out in April next year, and I can finally have these two Vintage Collection figures side by side. Also fun to just see the scale of this K-2SO figure, just how tall he is compared to Cassian there. This looks fantastic. I'm finally building up a bit of an Andor series display with my Vintage Collection figures. Slowly but surely we're getting there. I really wish Hasbro would release more, especially from the first season as we lead up into the second season. I want more. I know we've got a couple like Deirdre Mero coming out, so excited for her, but I really love the show and I want to be able to represent it in my Star Wars collection, because that's how I love showing my appreciation and excitement for Star Wars, is through my collectibles. And I had so much fun checking out this K-2SO. I know for some fans this one is a don't necessarily need to have if you already own the earlier one, but if you're like me, I like to cluster my toys, my Star Wars action figures, by series, so I didn't want to have to take out a K-2SO from a Rogue One and put him in the Andor display. I kind of need two, like in the way that you need Stormtroopers and R2-D2 in just about every scene, so you need multiples of them. So if you missed out like I did the first time this guy came around, we've now got a second opportunity to pick him up, and now getting this one out of the packet, I definitely need another one. I need to add this one to my original Rogue One display. Perhaps I'll put that other K-2SO figure a little bit more towards the back and put one of these guys in the front, and now I can have this one in my Andor series. A very small section at this point, but I'm hoping it gets a lot bigger, especially next year after the release. So this guy is just the coolest. I love it. Well, I love the droids of Star Wars, so unique. I love the KX-Droids, the stark comparison between the sinister sort of robotic sort of assassin droid nature of them, and then of course the sort of the humor of K-2SO himself. I can't wait to hear what lines and quotes he's going to give us in Series 2. This has been a really fun unboxing. I had a lot of fun. What a fantastic figure, and he just stands up and looks amazing. This is so much fun. Thank you so much for hanging out with me today as I opened up another Star Wars Vintage Collection action figure and had a lot of fun at checking out all of the details. I hope you have a wonderful morning, afternoon or evening, wherever you are in the galaxy, and let's hang out again really soon for more Star Wars fun. May the Force be with you. If you're a Vintage Collection fan, I recently opened up the Jod Na Narwood figure from Skeleton Crew. That video is linked here in case you haven't already seen it, as well as a whole Vintage Collection playlist. This is the way.